Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. I bear witness that no one deserves to be worshipped except Allah Ta'ala, the one who has no partner and no similar, the one who has no length and no width and no depth and no perimeter, the one who is not a volume and is not in a place. And how could he be in a place when he existed before time and space? He created everything except himself, including you and your actions. Nothing occurs except by his will, both good and bad, he destined to happen. He speaks without sound, letter, or language, not Arabic, Hebrew, nor Korean. He's not light, he's not a spirit, he has nothing in common with human beings. He's not in the direction of up, down, right, left, front, nor back. And whatever you imagine in your mind, Allah is different than that. And I bear witness that our noble, unrivaled Master Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is the slave of Allah, his final messenger, and the best of all of God's creations. May Allah unite us with him in paradise and grant us a drink from his basin. And may Allah increase us in patience, humility, knowledge, and comprehension, and help us to put our knowledge into practice and grant us all sincere intentions. Ameen. We're continuing in the book, the Hadrami Introduction, Al-Muqaddimah Al-Hadramiyya, which is an introductory text in Shafi'i fiqh written by the Allama Bafadl, rahimahullah. We're on page 20 in the book. Still, we're continuing in the chapter pertaining to blood, pertaining to the blood that exits from the woman's private part. Last week, alhamdulillah, we covered menstrual bleeding. And we said that menstrual bleeding must last for a minimum of 24 hours. And it cannot last more than 15 days. Excuse me for 1 minute. Assalamu alaikum. We were saying that menstrual bleeding lasts a minimum of 24 hours and can last no more than 15 days. And we made the point that when you're counting for the minimum of 24 hours, you're counting the actual hours of bleeding. So you're not counting the time that she's not bleeding. But when it comes to the maximum of 15 days, you're counting the time she's bleeding as well as the time she's not bleeding. So from the start of the bleeding, all she has until the end of 15 days from that moment, that's the window within which the menstruation has to begin and end. Okay, and we said that for most women it'll last 6 or 7 days. We also talked about the interval, which is the period between one menstruation and the next menstruation. That time in between the menstruations, when she's not bleeding, I like to refer to this time frame as the interval between menstruations. We said that the interval, the minimum for it is 15 days. So it's not possible for a woman to have one period end and the next period begin before 15 days has passed. Okay. And I asked you some questions to make sure it was understood, insha'Allah ta'ala. If anyone has questions about that, I encourage you first to review last week's lesson. But if you've done that and you still have questions, you can ask me here, insha'Allah ta'ala, or in a future live lesson. Let's continue in the book. Page 20. I'm in the paragraph, not the last paragraph, but the second from the last paragraph. It's talking here about the woman who has istihada. Istihada. So we mentioned at the start of the chapter last week that there are three types of blood that come from the woman's private part. One of these bloods is menstrual bleeding. Menstrual bleeding is blood that comes out from the woman even when she's healthy. Okay, this blood is not due to any kind of sickness or injury. Okay, and it's not due to childbirth. It's just the regular normal bleeding that happens due to a healthy woman's cycle. The second type of blood that comes from the woman's private part is postpartum bleeding or postnatal bleeding. This is blood that comes from her private part in the aftermath of her giving birth. Or to be more precise, in the aftermath of her emptying out whatever is in her womb. So once her womb is completely emptied, very frequently a woman will bleed after that. And that bleeding, there's no minimum for it. Okay, so the minimum amount of bleeding for postpartum bleeding is just like a moment. And the maximum for it is 60 days. And we'll talk about it. We haven't gotten to postpartum bleeding yet. We'll talk about it. But the third type of blood that comes from the woman is what we call istihada. Okay, istihada is blood which is due to sickness or injury. Okay, it's not menstrual bleeding, right? It's any blood that's not menstrual bleeding and not postpartum bleeding is istihada. Okay, and of course, a woman should not be bleeding if it's not her menstruation and it's not her postpartum bleeding, then she shouldn't be bleeding. Okay, so istihada, it's due to some kind of sickness or some kind of injury. All right, and the thing with istihada is it can come sporadically. Okay, it can come sporadically. So the rule is this blood, which comes out of the private part, the rule is the same as what we did in the earlier parts of the book. Earlier in the book, didn't we say that anything that comes out of one of the two exits breaks wudu? Okay, so it means that this istihada blood, it breaks wudu. Didn't we say in the istinja section that any moist thing that comes out of one of the two exits requires istinja? Okay, so this blood, this istihada, which is not menstrual bleeding or postpartum bleeding, istihada, it does not require a ghusl the way that menstruation and postpartum bleeding requires ghusl. Rather, istihada requires istinja. You simply wash the blood away, okay? And then you make wudu because it broke your wudu, and then you pray. All right, istihada is a pretty simple thing. All right, blood comes out, you wash it away, and you pray. Okay? Anytime that you want to pray, just wash away the blood, make wudu, and you pray. It gets complicated, though. It gets complicated in the case where the blood is like continuously coming. Okay, it gets more complicated in a situation where if you wash away the blood and you make wudu, you can't perform a salat before another bit of blood comes out and then breaks your wudu. If you're in that situation, that's what the author is going to talk about now, where the blood it's coming out so frequently. Maybe it's continuous, or maybe it's like a drip that's always coming out. But if the blood is coming out so regularly that you can't make a salat in between one drop coming out and the next drop coming out, in that case, you want to follow the rules that are here in the book. So let's read it. I'm in the paragraph, which is second from the bottom. It says, the woman who has continual bleeding washes her private part, then blocks the passage. Okay, so this woman has istihada such that it's always coming. What does she do? First, she washes away any blood from her body or her clothing. Okay, she cleans herself. The second thing she does is she blocks up her exit. So the place that the blood is coming from, which would be her vagina. She blocks it so that no more blood will come out. It says, except if the blood pains her or she is fasting. Okay, these are the two cases where she would not block up the place where the blood is coming out. Because if it pains her, like it causes her like significant pain, then the religion does not require her to, undergo that significant pain. And of course, if she's fasting, then putting something in the vagina will break the fast. So if you're fasting, you do not block up the vagina by stuffing something in there. Okay, but if she's not fasting, and if blocking the vagina will not cause significant pain, then this is what she needs to do. The woman who is continually bleeding, she washes away the blood and she blocks the passage. It says, if this isn't sufficient, she ties a bandage, which means if the blockage, if the thing that you blocked it with, like say you took some cotton balls or something and you stuffed up the opening with it, well, once you get up and walk around and go to make salat, maybe these cotton balls are going to fall out. Maybe they're going to shake loose as you walk or as you move in your salat, for example. That's what he means when he's saying if it's not sufficient just to block it, then in that case, you may need to do something to secure the block in place. You may need to do something to make sure that the block doesn't come out. That's what it means when it says to tie a bandage. Okay, like for example, you might take a strip of cloth, put it between the legs so it goes, one side up towards your stomach, one side, between the buttocks and up the back. You put that there so that what you blocked up the vagina can't come out. And then maybe you tie something else. You tie those ends to something that'll hold them in place so that this strip of cloth will not fall away either. Or you can secure it in some other way. But if blocking it by itself is not enough, because the block may come out, then you need to do something to secure that block in place. All of that is sort of like step one. You wash away the blood. That's step one. And then step two is you block the passage, which might require also securing the blockage in place. So you do those two things: wash away the blood, and then you block the passage. Then after that, it says, then she does wudu. Okay, so after she does those things, then she makes wudu. Okay, if she's able to make wudu. It says here, or tayammum. Okay, or tayammum, because sometimes if she's not able to make wudu because water's not available or because water will harm her, she may be in a situation where she makes tayammum instead of wudu. But regardless, if she's going to be making wudu or tayammum, she delays doing that until she's done these other things first. So she washes away the blood first, and she blocks the passage and secures the blockage second. Then she does either her wudu or her tayammum. Okay? And it says on time. What does that mean, on time? It means that this person whose blood is continually coming out, this person is not permitted to do these things until after the salat time comes in. It's not like a normal person. Right? A normal person can make their wudu during Asr time, and then when Maghrib time comes in, if they didn't break the wudu, they can pray. Okay? If they anticipate that Maghrib is coming in and they're going to have to pray, they can go ahead and make their wudu early. They can make their wudu during Asr time. And then they can pray with that wudu during Maghrib time as long as they didn't break their wudu. That's how it is for normal people. But the woman who is bleeding continually, like bleeding so much that she can't make a salat without blood interrupting it, this woman, she's in a special situation. This woman, she cannot make her wudu until the salat time comes in. After the salat time comes in, that's when she starts this whole process. She waits till the salat time to come in, then she washes the blood. Then she blocks the passage and secures the blockage. Then she makes wudu. And then she makes salat. She doesn't do any of that until the salat time comes in. And she doesn't waste any time between those steps. So she washes away the blood, and without wasting time, she blocks the passage, and without wasting time, secures the blockage. And without wasting time, she makes wudu, and without wasting time, she goes and she prays. Okay, this is what's required of the person who is what we call da'im al-hadath, the person who's constantly breaking wudu, the person who's always, having some kind of hadath come upon them because they're bleeding constantly, or because they're farting constantly, or because they have incontinence of urine or incontinence of some other bodily function. All right, if they're constantly breaking wudu, all right, they can't go a minute or two without breaking wudu. These people, these rules kick in. These people, they do istinja. They first wait for the salat time to come in, then they do istinja, then they block whatever opening the stuff is coming from. So in this case, since we're talking about blood, she blocks the vagina. But if we were talking about urine, which could come from a man or a woman, you block where the urine comes out from, and you secure the blockage. Then you make your wudu or your tayammum. Then you hurry to make salat. You don't waste any time between any of these steps. It says, if she delays for something not for the benefit of the prayer, she starts again. Okay, so what that means is, like I was saying, you can't waste time between these steps. You can't have any delays. You need to wait for the salat time to be in. And then once you start this process by washing the blood away, you don't waste any time after you finally wash the blood away before you block the vagina. And you don't waste any time after you block the vagina before you secure it in place if necessary. And you don't waste any time after that before you make your wudu. And you don't waste any time after that before you make your salat. All right, delaying at any step of this process invalidates the process and forces you to have to start the whole process over again. So you have to go back and make istinja again, and block the passage again, and secure the blockage again, and make wudu again, and rush to make your salat. You can't have any delays at all in this whole process. But as you see here, it says if she delays for something not for the benefit of the prayer, she starts again. So you should understand from that sentence that there is an exception. Thank you. There is an exception to this rule. You can take this. I don't need this. There is an exception to this rule, which is that she is allowed to delay if this delay is something that's in the interest of her salat. So for example, let's say, she washed herself, blocked herself, she made wudu, but now she needs to put clothes on. Okay, well, guess what? Covering your aura is in the interest of the salat. So if it takes her some time to cover the aura in between making wudu and making salat, that time that's used up doesn't harm her. We don't say, oh, she wasted time, she needs to start over. No, because putting on clothing is in the interest of the salat. All right? Turning to face the qibla is in the interest of the salat. Okay? Waiting for a short time, say, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, waiting for a short time in order for the other people to gather together so that you can pray in a group, that's in the interest of the salat. So if you know you're going to pray by yourself, then you go immediately to pray as soon as you're done with your wudu. But if you hope to pray in a group, and after you make your wudu, there's no group there for you to pray with, and so you choose to wait 5 minutes or 10 minutes until someone else comes so you can pray in a group, this delay, waiting for the sake of jama'ah, this delay also is in the interest of the salat, and so it does not mean that you have to start over again. Right? A delay which is in the interest of the salat is excused, but delays which are not in the interest of the salat are not excused. Inshallah, that is clear. He then says purity, and what he means here is purification, like the act of all the stuff that we just mentioned, cleaning the, making the istinja, blocking the passage, securing the blockage, making wudu. That whole process is what he means when he says purity here. Okay. purification. I personally would prefer to say purification, but purification and renewal of bandage is obligatory for every obligatory prayer. Okay, so you see now that these steps that you have to do, like this situation where the person is continually breaking wudu, like continuously with blood, for example, this situation is very similar to the situation of the one who doesn't have water and has to make tayammum. How are they similar? Because the one who has to make tayammum has to wait until the salat time is in before they make their tayammum. And there are things they have to do before they make their salat. And those things also have to wait until the time is in. The one who needs water needs to go look for water, right? And that looking also can't happen until the time is in. Okay, it's the one who is constantly bleeding is very similar to that in that they have a process. They don't need to look for water, but they have a cleaning and blocking process that they have to do, and the time has to already be in before they start that process. Okay, and just like the one who's making tayammum has to make a new tayammum for each salat, the woman who's bleeding constantly, she needs to do this whole process all over again for every single salat. I'm sorry, for every single obligatory salat. Just like the tayammum person, they don't have to do that for every salat, but for every obligatory one. Same here, this woman needs to repeat this process for every single obligatory salat. Okay, as for the sunnah salats, she can pray the sunnah salats without needing to renew this process, as long as she hasn't done something that breaks her wudu besides the blood that's constantly coming out. Something else of the things that breaks wudu would cause her to need to do this process again. But the thing that she can't control, the thing that is coming out constantly, that one is like excused. Also, it's worth noting that if her blockage was not well done, if she blocked it, say she didn't secure it in place because she didn't think she had to, she made her wudu and went to pray, and then in the prayer she realized that her blockage came out. Or say before the prayer she realized her blockage came out, then she needs to start the whole process over again. She needs to go back and do the istinja and then block it with a new blockage, and block it well, even if it means she has to secure it. Sometimes even if she secures the blockage, it gets loose and comes loose. So that means she didn't block it well. Okay, when we say she didn't block it well, it might mean that she didn't even try to secure it, or it means that she did try to secure it and she failed to secure it. Either way, she needs to begin the process over again. So what are the cases when she needs to start this process all over again? It would be if she wasted time in the middle of the process, or if her blockage was not done correctly, or if she intends to do a different obligatory salat, then she needs to do this all over again. And if she did something that breaks her wudu other than the blood coming out, then in that case, if she intends to do another prayer like a sunnah prayer, she will need to do the process over again. Last sentence in this paragraph, it says, the one who has incontinence of urine or pre-sexual fluid or wadi does the same. Okay, so just like the person who's bleeding so much that they can't keep a wudu long enough to make a salat, just like how that person has to go through all these steps, the one who has incontinence of urine has to go through all the same steps. All right, if a person drips, like urine is dripping out of them from time to time, to the point that they cannot make a salat in between drips, then this person has incontinence, and this person will have to go through all these steps. They have to wait till the salat time is in, wash away the urine, block the hole that the urine's coming out of, secure the blockage, make a wudu, and then rush to pray. Okay, and any wasting of time in the midst of this process means they have to start the process over again. And like we said before, if there's a delay that's in the interest of the salat, then that delay will not force them to restart the process. This is true for incontinence of urine. This is true for incontinence of pre-sexual fluid. Pre-sexual fluid is called in Arabic medhi. Medhi, is that wetness that will appear in the private part of the human being when they get sexually excited. Like before having sex, if a person is sexually excited, they might get some wetness coming out. This wetness is called medhi. And if a person has incontinence of medhi, where this medhi is just always coming out, so they can't keep a wudu long enough to make a salat, then that person is in this same category. They have to wait till the salat time is in, and they do istinja and wash away the medhi. Then they block the hole that the medhi is coming from, and they secure the blockage, and they make wudu, and then they rush to make salat. Or wedi. Wedi is a different fluid that might come out of the human being. It's very rare, but wedi is a fluid which is clear in color or white in color. And it sometimes comes out like if a person lifts something that's very, very, very heavy, they'll find due to the strain and stress that a liquid will come out. It's called wedi. If a person has wedi just constantly coming out, then they would do all of the same steps. Right? All of these are what we call da'im al-hadath, the person who is always causing hadath, always breaking wudu. These people have to follow these steps. Okay, and what I really want to emphasize, I've repeated it many times today, but I'm going to repeat it again to make sure you get it, is that you can't do it until the salat time is in, and you can't waste any time between the steps. All right? So any of you who have incontinence of urine, for example, which gets pretty common after a certain age, these are the rules you have to follow. Okay, these are the rules you have to follow. And any of you women who are bleeding, because various women react differently to various types of birth control. Sometimes the woman takes a certain kind of birth control and it makes her start bleeding, and like bleeding all the time. She'll bleed every day for 3 months. Sometimes when you have these kinds of reactions, this chapter is telling you what to do in that situation. Okay, this is telling you what to do in that situation. Insha'Allah ta'ala. Does anyone have any questions about that paragraph? That is the paragraph pertaining to istihada. Okay. Well, in that case, I will do just this last paragraph, and then I'll end the class probably a little bit earlier than usual. So we talked about menstruation last week. We talked about istihada just now, this week. And the last type of blood that comes from the woman's private part is postpartum bleeding. So let's read this last paragraph about that. It says the minimal postnatal bleeding is a moment, which means that it's possible for a woman to give birth and then not bleed at all afterwards. If a woman gives birth and after the baby comes out, she doesn't bleed at all, then this woman did not have postnatal bleeding. And this can happen. Although it's rare, this can happen. But if a woman does have postnatal bleeding, the shortest amount of time it can happen is just one burst of blood. So like after the baby comes out, she bleeds, like bloop, some blood comes out, and that's it. Like one little, exiting of blood is all that happened. That one exit of blood, as long as that one exit of blood came out of the woman after her womb was emptied, so after the baby and stuff came out, then one bit of blood came. That one bit of blood is postnatal bleeding. Okay, because the minimum amount of time that a woman might have postnatal bleeding is very short. The shortest amount of time is just one bit of blood coming out. It says, and the maximum is 60 days. Okay, so the longest amount of time that a woman can be postnatal bleeding is 60 days. You should understand from that if a woman bleeds for more than 60 days, then istihada is present. Okay, not all. If a woman bled, for example, for 70 straight days, not all of that was postnatal bleeding. Somewhere along the way, she got istihada, and she started bleeding due to something other than the childbirth. It says the average is 40 days. Okay, I would rather not say average. I'd rather say the normal amount is 40 days. I'm not aware that the scholars actually averaged it all, but just what's normal, like the most common amount, is about 40 days. So that's the more typical length of postnatal bleeding is 40 days, but it cannot be longer than 60. It says, with it, the same acts are prohibited as for that of menstruation. So the woman who is postnatal bleeding is forbidden from doing all of the same things that the woman who's menstruating is forbidden from doing. What are those things? Who can remember? Salat. So the person who is postnatal bleeding, as well as the woman who's menstruating, is forbidden from salat. Number 2, tawaf. Going around the Kaaba is called tawaf. Tawaf is forbidden for the one who's menstruating as well as the one who's postnatal bleeding. Number 3, touching the mushaf or carrying it. Okay, touching a mushaf or carrying it is forbidden for the one who's menstruating as well as the one who is postnatal bleeding. Number 4 is reciting the Quran with the tongue. This is forbidden for the one who is menstruating as well as the one who's postnatal bleeding. Number 5, entering into a masjid is forbidden for the one who's menstruating or postnatal bleeding on the condition that she fears that there's a chance, even if it's a small chance, she doesn't feel absolutely safe that she won't contaminate the masjid. Okay, if a woman feels perfectly 100% sure she's not going to get any blood on the masjid, well, then she's allowed to enter in. Okay, but as long as she doesn't feel absolutely safe that she won't get any blood on the masjid, then in that case it is haram for her to enter the masjid. Okay, and even in the case where she does feel safe that she won't get any blood on the masjid, in the case where she's allowed to enter it, even in that case, she's not allowed to stay in the masjid. She's only allowed to enter it for the sake of walking straight through and going out the other side. She's not allowed to stay in there and talk or just walk back and forth inside or something like that. Okay, that was what? Number 5. Number 6, it's forbidden for her to fast. So the menstruating woman, as well as the postnatal bleeding woman, is forbidden from fasting. Number 7, the postnatal bleeding woman and the menstruating woman is also forbidden from allowing the husband to enjoy what's between her navel and her knee. Okay. Number 8 is divorce. No. It's not haram for a man to divorce his wife while she's postnatal bleeding. So forget I said that one. This is one difference between postnatal bleeding and menstruation. It's haram for a husband to divorce his wife while she's menstruating. It's not haram for a husband to divorce his wife while she's postnatal bleeding. MashaAllah. And I'll also repeat that in the case of fasting, she becomes allowed to fast once her postnatal bleeding ends. So when the postnatal bleeding or the menstrual bleeding ends, fasting becomes permissible for her. But the other things on this list do not become permissible for her until after she makes ghusl. So for the other things in the list, the salat, the tawaf, touching the mushaf, reciting Quran, allowing the husband to enjoy her, for example, all these things, she has to wait for the bleeding to stop and has to perform a valid ghusl. And only after both of those things happen will those other things become permissible. Fasting is the exception. Fasting becomes permissible even if she hasn't made her ghusl yet. As long as the bleeding has stopped, she can make that intention to fast and begin fasting, inshallah. If any of you have any questions about this chapter, please ask now. I'm going to stop here a little bit early. We'll pick up on the Salat chapter next time, inshallah ta'ala. I'll go through the comments and see if anyone has any questions. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi ta'ala for all those who salamed me. I don't think I saw many questions today, so yeah, I don't see any right now. So I'm just going to take that as a sign that this lesson was exceedingly clear and everyone understood, mashallah. And that is definitely what I hope is the case. That said, let's say La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات. Barakallahu feekum. I'll see you next week, inshallah ta'ala, at the normal time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.